Hello and welcome to another episode of Cake Fight Presents The Making of Kaleidoscope. I'm writer, director, producer Paige Feldman, and this week, as every week, I'm taking you inside my process of making my debut feature film. We're going from idea to premiere in real time. So I am ecstatic to report that just before recording this, I have finished the on-paper revisions for the first draft of Kaleidoscope. I edit all of my scripts on paper. I print them out, I use a pen, I use my chicken scratch, and I edit on paper. So I still have to type in the changes before I know what this new draft feels like and looks like, and most importantly, how many pages I cut from the 263 pages that I started with. And all of that I'm going to talk about next week. But this week, so a week ago Monday, May 2nd, 2022, for those of you who are watching a little bit later, there was a leaked opinion from the Supreme Court. It was a draft opinion, which is something that is giving me hope. I'm hoping that Justice Alito is being a little law school gunner asshole and taking his reasoning for overturning Roe v. Wade to the most egregious extreme before cutting it down and making it, I don't know, like, basically abortion rights are about to be considered a states' rights issue in this country, which means that women in a majority of states, I believe, are not going to have any inherent abortion access, and many will not be able to access health care. It's really rough and it's really devastating, and the extent that this draft opinion goes in bulldozing over people's rights and over the right to privacy and the right to decide for yourself who you want to be, what you want to do, and the ability to give yourself medical care, it's egregious and terrible. And in times like this, it is really difficult to feel like writing or creating things or telling stories even matters. So that's what I want to talk about today. Not the pity party, oh my God, why do I do this, but why I do this, why I create, and why creating and storytelling matters maybe even more than ever in times like these. So I'm gonna roll those titles. When I come back, let's chat. So here is why I keep creating, keep writing, keep telling stories, even when things in the world feel really bleak, and telling stories and making movies feels like such a frivolous and unimportant thing. First is a promise that I made to myself when I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. So I got my JD in 2010, and I took the bar and I failed by 6 points. A passing score was 1,200. I got an 1194. So really on the cusp there. I didn't want to be a lawyer at that point anyway, but at that moment it kind of felt like my fate was sealed. And the one regret I have and had about not being a lawyer is the fact that as a lawyer, it would be fairly easy for me to find a job making a difference in people's lives on a daily basis, influencing policy, fighting injustice on a very direct level. I was on the path to doing really cool social justice work, but it just wasn't my passion, and I wasn't great at it, to be frank. When I failed the bar, when my fate was fully sealed, I made a promise to myself that all the energy I was going to use to fight injustice when I thought I was going to be a lawyer, that I put all of that energy into writing the stories that I'm writing, telling the stories that I'm going to tell. That is why diversity and inclusion is such an important and integral part of my work, because I want to help people in the world feel seen. Not only that, I want people who are already seen in the world to see those people who don't feel seen yet and understand them, be able to empathize with them, because that understanding is going to create a better and more inclusive world. So in these times of injustice being highlighted, those are the times that I personally need to step up and fight and tell stories that are going to have an impact on the world. Stories can have a huge impact on the world, and that's not just me justifying my decision not to go be a civil rights attorney. It's real stuff. Think about the brouhaha that was caused in like 1997 when Ellen came out both on her TV show and in real life, providing lesbian visibility, someone who wasn't ashamed of it, and putting a lesbian as a main character on a really successful and beloved TV show. Imagine the impact of seeing that if you're in the middle of a really repressed small town and you are in the LGBTQ community, seeing, oh, someone like me is on TV. Maybe I'm not so alone in this world. Maybe there's other places where I'm going to be accepted. It's not just about finding ways to make people who are on the margins feel more included. It's also about informing and educating people on hard subjects. Remember all those 90s sitcoms that had these very special episodes? There was like one on Full House where Stephanie discovered that her friend, like a little boy, was being abused by his family, and she didn't tell anyone, but she helped him live in her house and get a good night's sleep and be safe. And then at the end of those episodes, there was always a talk about how you should tell a parent and how you should handle it. And there were hotlines. There were episodes on drinking, and another Full House episode about eating disorders when DJ decided to starve herself so that she could go to a pool party because she didn't feel like she looked good enough in a bathing suit. Those episodes also, I'm sure, helped people, especially kids who are watching them, feel less alone, know that there were ways that they could get help, know that they weren't the only one who was struggling with body image. I mean, it's a powerful thing in this world to know that you're not alone, that you're not so strange that no one can relate to you, and that maybe someone can help you with a problem you might have. And stories, especially films and TV, can really help do that. And more than just helping people who are different in some way, or who are having a certain experience that they feel is unique to them and therefore no one can help them, helping these people feel less alone, it's also about taking people who are in the majority. And I'm not just talking about white, cis, straight Christian men, but like especially them, but in any way where you fit into a population that is historically represented or overrepresented. It's important for you to be able to watch TV and movies that explore other cultures and other ways of being so that you can find empathy, especially in the case of white, straight, cis Christian men, to find characters who are women or people of color or in the LGBTQ community or who are of a minority religion. Find characters who you can relate to and empathize with and who you want to emulate. And especially for small children, because if you can empathize with a person who doesn't look like you, if you have the opportunity to do that, as so many of us who didn't fit into that majority representation mold had to do in order to find a character that we loved, the world is going to be a better and more empathetic place. I mean, take a look at Sesame Street. It's a program aimed at children about a super multicultural and diverse neighborhood where everybody gets along, works out their problems, and learns from each other. It's not just about race or gender or, I guess, species, because you got Big Bird and Snuffleupagus. But there's also neurodiverse characters, characters with disabilities, and characters with other religions and who speak other languages. And this is public television programming where kids get to learn empathy right off the bat. And also, there's some groovy songs, and there's Muppets, and Muppets are awesome. And I loved Sesame Street growing up, but I also was, as always, into whatever my parents were watching at the time. I had the worst case of FOMO as a kid. When I was little, I would sneak out of my bed and listen to the TV show that my parents were watching. Couldn't see it, but I could hear all of it because I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So I watched Friends growing up. When I was 11, the episode with the lesbian wedding, the one with the lesbian wedding, was out. And I'm sure I'd been exposed to gay people, to lesbian people before that, but that episode really it was all about, we're preparing for Ross's ex-wife to marry her lesbian partner. I spent 30 minutes hearing about a lesbian wedding. And there were jokes about it, obviously, and Friends is definitely not a perfect show, especially in terms of LGBTQ representation, especially with what we know now. But at the time, they were just treating it as a wedding, and there were jokes about it. But the whole affair, especially when we got to the wedding, was treated with just as if it was a normal thing. It's allowed me as an 11-year-old to see, hey, I guess there's nothing wrong with this. It's different, but these people love each other. They should get married. It's actually a really beautiful ceremony. I think that really helped me, especially growing up in St. Louis, Missouri in the 90s and 2000s. There were a lot of conservative people around me. It helped me to just be open and accepting. And then my favorite example of a movie or TV show that centers a culture that's not my own in a way that also doesn't center the majority. Because so often, when you have a culture that's historically underrepresented being represented and being the centerpiece of a film or a TV show, too often it is being represented through the eyes of someone in a majority culture, in a Western culture, in a white, cis, straight, Christian male culture. But The Farewell, Lulu Wang's feature starring Awkwafina about a young woman who goes to visit her grandmother in China because she has cancer and no one in the family's telling her. The whole movie, it's just about this family, just about this cultural decision, and there is no explanation for the white Western people in the audience, for the non-Chinese American people in the audience, the non-Chinese people in the audience. It just is the story, and you have to sit there, empathize, and understand. And it's incredible and wonderful, and I love it, and I highly recommend you watch. There's also a real power that stories have to bring to light important issues. Good Energy Stories is an amazing organization that I first heard about on Script Notes, the podcast that John August and Craig Mazin record about screenwriting and things interesting to screenwriters. Good Energy Stories is an organization that is harnessing the power of stories to help educate people and energize them to action on climate change. The philosophy of Good Energy Stories is that stories have the power to change people's minds and make people act, because if all it took were facts to make people spring to action, we would have solved climate change a long time ago. But through the power of stories and showing people what life is like living through climate change and potentially after climate change, and also using stories to showcase things we can do in our daily lives to help lessen the effects of climate change, like in set dressing, having solar panels around, or showing characters turning off lights, for example, like the bare minimum. We can help reduce the number of degrees that the Earth's temperature is raised by promoting these stories, helping incite people to action, and making people aware of the effect they could have on climate change and the effect that climate change could have on them. So I'll put a link in the description below to Good Energy Stories so that you can take a look at the awesome work they're doing, because also their website's beautiful. And it's pretty inspirational, because if stories can help climate change so much, I mean, like, the possibilities are endless. And I think Good Energy Stories' mission highlights the fact that if you see something in a novel or on TV or in a movie and you see these characters having conversations about a tough issue, it makes it easier for you to bring it up in your daily life. There's a gateway there. It's a, have you read this? Have you seen this? To start the conversation, instead of, let's talk about abortion. Which is kind of what I want to circle back to now, because 50 years ago, a show called Maude was on the air. Now, Maude was created and produced by Norman Lear, the fantastic, revolutionary TV wizard and writer who brought us All in the Family, The Jeffersons, and Sanford and Son. Norman Lear was no stranger at bringing up social issues. On Maude, 50 years ago, 1972, before the Roe v. Wade decision was made, he had an episode on the air of Maude, a two-parter about abortion. Maude, played by Bea Arthur, had unexpectedly gotten pregnant at the age of 47. She was already a mother, she was a grandmother, and despite being in a good place to potentially raise a child in terms of finances, she decided that she didn't want another kid, and she got an abortion. And the two-part episode was about Maude coming to that decision and going through with the abortion. I mean, this 50 years ago is incredible. incredible that that was on the air. There were 2 stations that didn't air it, one in Champaign, Illinois, and one in Peoria, Illinois. Detroit wasn't going to air it, but then thanks to an investigation and inquiry by the New York Times, among others, they relented and decided to air it. Most people who saw the show on the air were really just happy and in favor of it. And Maude at the time, the character lived in New York, and New York had legalized abortion in 1970, so she could go to the doctor and get an abortion. So in doing research for this video, I happened to find on the New York Times digitized archive an article written in 1972, just a couple weeks after these episodes aired. It's by a woman named Algene Harmetz, and she talks about the impact that Norman Lear has had on not only television, but on society and what his stories meant. And I want to read a few excerpts of this because I think it really brings home the importance of what storytelling and strong storytelling and telling the truth can do and the impact that it can have. So the article is called "Maude Didn't Leave 'Em All Laughing." It's not critical of the episode though. So about Norman Lear, she writes, "Before All in the Family, television comedy was a vast playground for witches, Martians, and crazy ladies who constantly dressed in disguises or mistook their husband's boss for the milkman. Relationships were relentlessly stapled together out of cardboard and then wrapped in cellophane with professional-looking bows. The few non-plastic situation comedies were gentle and relatively melodramatic and contained no meanness. All in the Family was, in one sense, a way of picking one's nose in public. It provided a certain catharsis in the knowledge that the things we did or thought or felt in private were not a foreign country. Ethel's menopause, Mike's impotence, Gloria's miscarriage, the death of a cousin in the bunker's upstairs bedroom, and Archie's subsequent rage at being pressured into paying the funeral expenses were not only fit but elegant subjects for laughter." So Norman Lear, according to Algene Harmetz, created a space in which dialogue about the tiny closets of life that people didn't want to let others into, they were on TV, could let the light in on some of your dark secrets. And Norman Lear's work continues in Maude. Here are all of the things, apart from abortion, that these 2 episodes of Maude got to deal with. Birth control, the gizmo. Why weren't you using the gizmo? It didn't work. I'm assuming the gizmo was a diaphragm. Also talked about suicide. I'm just figuring out how many yards of tubing it'll take from the exhaust pipe to the rear window on the '69 Corvair. Toilet training. There's also the mentions of perversion and sexual embarrassment. Twice a week I had to go to the laundromat. I hated that place. It was full of perverts. They used to love to sit in front of the machines and watch nylon panties go round and round. Like, this is nothing today. But Maude helped create a space where when that was something, helped normalize it, so now it's not anything. So here's why Norman Lear wrote this episode of Maude and his philosophy on television and storytelling in general. "My fight is to get a funny script on a subject that is adult and meaningful. I enjoy stirring feelings, even negative feelings, because I think that is what theater is about. It's marvelous to know you've engaged the feelings of millions of people." That's what stories can do. You can ensnare people's thoughts and make them think and create a ruckus and create change. With this episode, Norman Lear actually even just told the TV Guide, instructed them not to include the word abortion because he wanted people to watch without any preconceived notions. He wanted them to come to this episode about Maude's pregnancy with just the idea that, oh, okay, so our favorite character is getting pregnant, and then be walloped with the thought of her getting an abortion, and then considering what this well-loved character, what her decision meant for them, what her decision might mean for other people, and to maybe recontextualize their idea of what women who got abortions looked like, and what abortion looked like in general for a woman who might have the privilege at the time, living in a state that allowed the procedure to be performed safely in a doctor's office. So this article finishes with a quote from Richard Levinson, who co-wrote and produced a movie called That Certain Summer, which starred Hal Holbrook as a gay man who was living with his lover, Martin Sheen, and Hal Holbrook's son came to visit, and it's about this son reestablishing his relationship with his father and coming to terms with the fact that his father was gay. So Richard Levinson said, "The show about homosexuality and All in the Family was a groundbreaker for everybody, that it was what allowed other people to explore that subject. And I saw Patton on television the other night. When George Scott said, "We're going to go through that field like crap through a goose," I knew that line wouldn't have been on television before All in the Family. Lear is, of course, correct. The honorable vulgarity of All in the Family has opened the door to Maude's abortion. If we're lucky, it's a door that will never shut properly again. That was, again, from Algene Harmitz in the New York Times in 1972, a couple weeks after the episode about Maude's abortion went live. And that's what makes stories so magical. You can have one small ripple, and it creates a storm of change. Reading about the power that Norman Lear's TV had over just like the entire culture, allowing the word crap to be said on television, which isn't a small thing. It's eroding these stringent puritanical norms and allowing ways to let the light in through the cracks on things that maybe people were ashamed of, but they shouldn't be. Because the human experience deserves to be discussed. No one deserves to feel alone. I'm so excited I can barely talk straight. So I want to tell stories because of the impact they can have, with the hopes that maybe one person watches one of my films or reads a novel that I wrote and thinks, oh, I can relate to that character. And I didn't know that anyone else felt that way. I didn't know anyone else behaved that way. I can see myself there in that person. I can see myself in that story. If one person feels that way, feels less alone, then I've done my job. Of course, I want to do more than that. I want to create a sea change of social justice. But if I can start with one person, that one person could go on to make somebody else feel that way. And suddenly there's a whole world of people who are just doing amazing things and making change and making the world a better place. And the final reason that telling stories, even now, even when the world is a dumpster fire, is important is because I can. So often in the past week and a half, I've felt impotent. I've felt silenced, I've felt scared, and like my voice doesn't matter. And not only like it doesn't matter, but like there are people who are actively out there who are looking to make it so that I can't talk. I mean, the way that some of these conservative assholes talk about limiting abortion, it's as if a grown woman is nothing more than an incubator the moment that she's sexually active. I am not an incubator. I am a human being with a lot of thoughts and opinions, and I will share them all with you if you ask. And in these times of upheaval, the physical act of writing, of telling a story, of outlining, of editing my audio series, it reminds me that I have a voice and that I can use it and that I am not silenced yet. Even if they try to silence me, like it's really hard to shut me up when you get me talking. So I'm gonna write because I can. My feminism and my desire for change and progression in the world is an act of rebellion on its own. It's not enough on its own, but I'm doing something by using my voice and sharing my perspective and telling my stories because the bad guys want everyone silenced who doesn't agree with them. That's my motivation for when it feels too bleak, for when the job of creating huge impact feels like too much. Just reminding myself that I have the power to speak, and I'm going to use it to tell stories that help inspire people, make them feel, make them think, make them empathize, and hopefully change the world for the better, if that's not too corny. So what am I doing in my writing right now to really push that forward? I'm gonna get back to work on Kaleidoscope, typing in those changes and thinking about the next draft even as I'm not quite finished with this first revision. I'm already dealing with issues of mental health and anxiety in Kaleidoscope, which are important to me because those are things that are heavily stigmatized. Just even the idea of going to therapy was heavily stigmatized when I was growing up. But I'm also going to look for ways in future rewrites to add in some dialogue that is about feminist issues, reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, immigration rights, causes that I believe in. If for nothing else, just to put the little tidbit out on the table and help start a discussion or make people who might not have considered those issues think about them a little bit more while enjoying a really fun, sexy, funny romantic comedy. But all of that is going to have to wait until after I finish typing in the changes. And I'll be back next week to tell you about where I got with the rewrite, how many pages I cut, and what the next steps are. In the description below, besides including all of the links I talked about earlier, I'm also going to include links where you can donate to abortion funds to help people in areas where abortion will be difficult or maybe even impossible to access get the healthcare that they need to keep themselves healthy and happy and sane. So until next week, donate, sign petitions, be loud, be disruptive, fight for what you believe in, keep writing. I'll do the same, and I'll see you next week for more on the making of Kaleidoscope. Bye. Algene's like, listen guys, I'm gonna tell you how much I love this show, but don't worry, I'm not one of those people that would have an abortion. You know what, Algene, you should have an abortion if you want to have an abortion. Although 50 years later, if you were 47, if you're alive right now, like, good on you.